We begin today with a question that sounds like an actor seeking advice from a director. And perhaps it is, in a cosmically spiritual Shakespearean sort of way. This is a case where we are the actors on the stage of life, and the director, well, the director's God, of course. So we seek the answer to the question that probably should be on our minds every day of our lives, and that is, what's my motivation? Welcome to the Sky Pilot podcast that explores questions of faith, spirituality, and religion. I'm Dan Matthews, and I don't have all the answers, but I do enjoy the questions. Welcome to the podcast where every question is an invitation into a spiritual quest, and you're invited along for the journey. Hi, I'm Dan, and this is my companion, Quark. Hi, I'm Dan, and this is my companion and heckler, Quark.
Hello.
I think of him as an alien version of those two old guys who are on the Muppet Show up in the balcony heckling the show.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
Welcome to the Sky Pilot Faith Quest podcast, the video version. Do me a favor, click on the like, subscribe, and be sure to ring that bell. You don't even have to pause the video to do those things, and it helps so much helping this channel be discovered by other viewers. I'm not selling anything. I'm not trying to convert anyone, nor do I make a dime off any of this. My sole motivation is this. If there are people out there who would get something out of this, out of these videos, I'd like them to find them. And that's where you come in. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and it helps with all of that. Now, on with the show. I bought my first Macintosh computer in 1985. It wasn't the first iteration of that computer that ever came out on the market. That was released a year earlier in 1984 and was introduced to the world very dramatically through a Super Bowl ad that gave us a view of a dystopian society and how the Macintosh computer was going to solve that. And if you've never seen the commercial I'm talking about, just remember that the year was, 1984, and lots of people were thinking about the book. Again, 1984. In the commercial, everything is gray and without color. A Big Brother character speaks to the crowd from the screens that are everywhere, and as they march through this drab and bleak world, the only color anywhere is on a female runner being chased by the police. Think more of like troopers, stormtroopers than police. The people are dutifully filing their way into an auditorium of some kind with a gigantic screen in front of them, and they are mesmerized by what's on the screen and yet effectively flat as they watch the screen. The woman who's being chased is carrying a sledgehammer, which she ultimately runs into the room where everyone is being seated, and just before she can be captured, she throws the sledgehammer and smashes the screen in a dramatic and blinding explosion. Then the voiceover on the commercial says,
"On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
The commercial was an immediate sensation, and more than just a bit of controversy grew up surrounding it. The family of George Orwell, who was the author of, again, 1984, sued Apple. Whoever it was who actually owned the rights of the story, it wasn't the family any longer, sent a cease and desist letter to Apple. And all of this made the commercial even more interesting, even more popular with the general public. There's something about Apple that, from the very beginning, from that commercial on, Apple has wanted us to understand that they aren't selling technology. They want us to believe that buying their stuff is buying into a lifestyle, a culture, a way of life. Since that first Macintosh that I got, that my parents purchased for me as I went off to seminary, my wife Sarah and I and our two kids have purchased at least 10 Macintosh computers over the last 30 odd years. We've also owned iPods, iPhones, speakers, iPads. We've just about bought it all. I probably don't need to tell you at this point that I am an Apple fan, as you can almost certainly tell. I realize they aren't perfect, but I really like two things about them. And one is when you own several of their products, they work together in some pretty wonderful ways. If a call comes in on my phone, I can answer it on my phone. I can answer it on my iPad. I can answer it on my AirPods. I can answer it on my desktop computer or even on my watch. The integration is just pretty cool. Second, although not perfect, Apple seems to be a company that sees the people who buy their products as the actual end client. Many other technology companies see the end consumer actually as their product. Their goal is to get you on their product so they can sell your data to other companies. Now, let me be clear. Apple isn't perfect in this area, but I just think they're better than a lot of other companies that I've looked at. Now, let's move on from that because this isn't an advertisement for Apple. Speaking of being not perfect, let's talk about the man whose name will forever be linked with the company, the man whose vision propelled it to become, well, what it is today, the man who was the creator of this idea that Apple is selling lifestyle and progressive countercultural temperament as much as any product. We are talking about, of course, Steve Jobs. In the world of Apple fans, there are those who see him as a bit of a saint. Evidently, in our society, if you have a level of genius combined with amazing financial success, you get treated as if you're some sort of life guru. And since his products were sold with this kind of buy into our vision for life thing, I guess it makes sense that he became the focus of so much study and emulation for so many people. So today, I'm going to start with Steve Jobs, a quote of his. I'm going to use his quote, but you could use a quote from almost anyone. Literally hundreds of famous people have said something similar to this. But Jobs is as well known, better known probably than any of them, by far more financially successful than any of them were. And so we'll use him because, as I said, we really like those things. Fame and wealth are really big in our society. I pulled this quote from the book I, Steve by George Beam. It's a book that is a compilation of Steve Jobs' own words. And on this particular occasion, I think he was speaking at a baccalaureate graduation ceremony. And he said this.
When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me. And since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today?
As I said, this is Steve Jobs' version of the quote, but nearly identical sayings have come out of so many people's mouths. It really need not be attributed to anyone in particular, but on this occasion, he said it, he gets credit, so let's jump in. It purports to offer a guide to life, but here's the problem. It's not true. It's not profound. It doesn't really, to me, say anything at all. The whole idea of living every day as if you might die is really not particularly true. It's not particularly helpful. First, there are 100 things that we could put into this sentence to make it clear, I think, of the silliness of the same. Live every day as if your shoelace will break. Live every day as if you will get a cold. Live every day as if you will be forced to miss lunch. Live every day as if a friend will die. All of these will one day be true, but do they really change in any helpful way the way you live your life today?
Yes, okay, but there are those who would say that these are hardly the same. You're comparing a broken shoelace to dying.
Yes, you're right. The shoelace is actually more of a practical example. Live every single day as if it's going to break. Keep a spare in your pocket, and you're done. But saying to live every day as if it might be your last is impractical. You really don't do it. And more importantly, let's be honest, Steve Jobs in no way made any attempt to do this either. Look, here's what we know about Steve Jobs' work ethic, and it's really well known. He was a workaholic. He was intensely focused on work and results. He normally woke up around 6 a.m. and evidently started working immediately. He would often work until 10 p.m. He often worked through the weekend and even holidays. Work wasn't just important to him. It was, for most of his life, pretty much the only thing. Nothing about that life sounds like a guy using his final day as some sort of moral guide for his activities each day that he wakes up. And let's talk about what life would look like if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, if you knew today was going to be your last.
Gosh, that sounds like a lot of fun for everyone.
Okay, that's a fair point. Let's look at my life instead. What would life be like if I lived like I was, going to die tomorrow and I knew it? Well, it's pretty clear that I would spend the day, my last day, with people I care about, telling them things I want them to know. So if I really lived every day like today was my last day, every day would be spent filling my time with family and dear friends and making clear to them just how much they mean to me. Yeah, that's about it. Now, Jobs and I are different people, but I can tell you he did very little of that in his life. And it wasn't until he was actually dying that he began making an attempt to change his way of interacting with some of the people who were closest to him. So not only is it not really good advice, it's not really profound, it's not really helpful, the guy who said it, who said he did it every day, yeah, he didn't. Now, it would be fair to ask at this point if I am picking on Steve Jobs, and I think it's also fair to say, no, I don't think I am. Because when a famous person stands up and says, use my life and my choices as a model for your life and your choices to come, then I think anything they say immediately after that point, is fair game for evaluation. Just like I get emails and messages challenging some of the things I say in my podcasts, which is fair. I have intentionally put my thoughts out for public consumption. So evaluating them is absolutely fair game. Now, moving on, let's jump to the faith component of this, because I've already mentioned I don't really like the notion of being motivated in life by the fear of death. There is a particular element within the Christian faith, and I assume other faiths as well, but I'm going to stick with that with which I'm most knowledgeable. So there is an element in Christianity that really sees us in a relationship with a God who is disappointed with us, a God who would just as soon be done with us once and for all. But we are thankful. We're thankful for that. We are. Why are we thankful, you ask?
Yes, that is actually precisely what I'm wanting to ask.
Well, we're thankful because we can awaken every day knowing that God should have killed us in our sleep, but has mercifully allowed us to live another day. He didn't kill us. See what a great God he is?
Are there really people who believe that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the most famous sermons preached in the history of English-speaking Christianity was preached by the Reverend Jonathan Edwards in 1741. And this is a quote from his sermon. The God that holds you over the pit of hell much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. He is of purer eyes than to bear to have you in his sight. You are 10,000 times so abominable in his eyes as the most hateful, venomous serpent is in ours. You have offended him infinitely more than a stubborn rebel did his prince, and yet 'tis nothing but his hand that holds you from falling into the fire every moment. 'Tis to be ascribed to nothing else that you did not go to hell the last night, that you were allowed to awaken again in this world after you closed your eyes to sleep. There is no other reason to be given why you have not dropped into hell since you rose in the morning, but that God has held you up. Now, first. As you may have noticed, I made a little edit because the wording strays so much from our modern usage, our modern vocabulary, our modern kind of way of saying things that I think it might have caused some people difficulty in understanding at that point, and they got stuck and wouldn't be able to move on. So anyway, I made a change. I didn't change the meaning, just 2 words I changed in order to help other people understand what the intent was. Now, having said that, I want to be clear. I think the theology, the understanding of God that is reflected here is wrong. I'm not the slightest bit personally drawn to any faith that uses fear as the ultimate motivation to live differently. Fear of God as a motivation elicits a mindset in which we are kind of living out God's own real-life version of the Survivor television show. And again, I don't think that is God's intention. Plus, all this reminds me of a quote from one of my very favorite movies. Remember the movie The Princess Bride? Wesley's ship is besieged by the pirate ship, and he is taken prisoner by none other than the dread pirate Roberts, who decides not to kill Wesley on sight, but instead to keep him alive as his valet. And every night, the dread pirate Roberts says the same thing to Wesley at the end of the day.
Good night, Wesley. Good work. Sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning.
Which, to me, is not a particularly compelling way of life, either for Wesley or for us in our relationship with God. Live every single day as if you may, well, be dead tomorrow seems to assume that life is lived with our focus on 2 important things. First, fear. Obviously the fear of death, but also tomorrow. The idea is about not what we'll be doing today so much, not what we hope for today. So the message here is live in fear and always keep your focus on tomorrow, which seems to me to be the very opposite of what I believe God to really be about. I think God wants us to live joyfully, not fearfully, and live fully into this moment and not worry about what tomorrow may bring. Now, all of this comes about from a book I'm currently reading. It's a book by one of my 2 favorite authors. The current book is written by Brandon Saunderson, and in this book...
Are you just going to move on? Leave us hanging and not tell us the other author's name? You're going to do that, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Right. The other author is Neil Gaiman, and he's written a bunch of stuff that would make wonderful material for podcasts and videos as well. But that's not who we're talking about today. Today, I'm talking about Brandon Saunderson. And in this book that's entitled Warbreaker, there is a conversation with a character named Denth. D-E-N-T-H, Denth. He's a mercenary and also, strangely, a bit of a philosopher. No, he's very much of a philosopher, actually. And in one particular scene, he's speaking to a woman who feels like, well, she has shined a light on the fact that when push came to shove, when her life was in danger, she did not behave as she would have wished she did. She wallows in her self-disappointment and her frustration, and in the midst of that, he breaks her out of it. He replies with the following. They say a man doesn't know himself until he faces death for the first time, he said in a conversational tone. I don't know about that. It seems to me that the person you are when you're about to die isn't as important as the person you are during the rest of your life. Why should a few moments matter more than an entire lifetime? As I was reading the book, I read, obviously, this quote, and I loved this quote. Again, obviously, it seems to me that ultimately in life, the important things we do are not the things we achieve, but the choices we make. If you invent an amazing product, take it to market, make $1 billion along the way, but step on, use, abuse, and take advantage of people all along the way, every day, what is the measure of that life? Versus the person who was kind, treats others with generosity, never earned much, but did those things every day. When you encounter someone in life, say a homeless person on the street, you often make a decision about whether or not you will help, whether or not you're going to engage by the following criterion. Will it make a difference? But in that moment, the question shouldn't be, how will this decision I make change tomorrow or change this man's life in the future? The decision should be based on the now, not about the future. Isn't it funny how hard it is to live in the now? We worry about the future. Shoot, we worry about the past too. I saw a meme a couple of weeks ago that said something like, I'm all too often awakened in the middle of the night with the thing I wish I'd said in a passing conversation to a total stranger 3 years ago. Now, let me be clear. As a person who has many of these nighttime moments, these are always about some pithy one-liner comeback I could have said that would have broken through to the person and changed his or her life outlook, their attitude forever. If I could have just in that moment figured out the perfect thing to say, oh man, that would have been perfect.
So, have you ever thought of those things at that moment and managed to actually say them?
Oh, absolutely.
And what were the results?
Well, my goal in that moment was to break through, or so I thought. But mostly when I do think of the right thing to say in those moments, it's really not about trying to break through. I think in reality, very often, if you say what comes to mind, it's not about breaking through. It's just about trying to break the person in general. So it's not actually the right thing to say, even though it might feel like it in the moment. I don't really care much about living every moment as if it might be my last moment alive. I sure do hope, though, at the end of my days, it is said that more often than not, I was not as concerned about my end of life, my last day, as I was about enhancing the lives of those I encountered every single other day of my life. That's all for today. What do you think? Have I missed it? Perhaps thinking about the last day of life really is a useful way of finding profound motivation, and I just don't understand it. And if so, let me know. If you have a daily motivation reminder that you use in your life, also let me know. You can put all of that down in the comments below. And if you have an idea for a future episode of this video, drop that in the comments section below too. As always, I'd love to hear from you. And on your spiritual journey, may you ask questions, seek answers, and kindly and generously go wherever the quest takes you. Thanks for joining us here today and being part of the SkyPilot Faith Quest community. This is a great place to ask questions you wouldn't feel comfortable or safe asking in other places. And remember, the sign of a strong faith, solid religion, or healthy spiritual journey is not certainty, but that you keep asking questions.